Hello, readers. Today I want to pause on learning new strategies and take just a moment to think about the strategies that we've developed that we're really great at. Those would be our strengths. But then to also look at some of our skills and see where our weaknesses are. And that's how we find areas to improve upon. Then, once we find those, we can ask ourselves questions like, how can I develop even stronger ideas about my character? What goals can I set that will help me read even better? Because after all, during our reading time, our job is to become better and better each time we open up a new text. So I'm going to show you how I can use our learning progressions and also look at some noticings that I developed while I was reading some of our chapters 10 and 11 from Because of Winn-Dixie. And I'm going to take a look at what I've noticed, and I'm going to take a look at our learning progressions and see where my noticings lie. What stage do they lie in? And then what do I need to do in order to go up to the next step? What can I improve on? And then I'm going to use that to develop some goals. Then you will do the same thing on your own today. All right, let's get started. So I was looking back at my chapter book Because of Winn-Dixie, and I like to use Post-it notes as I'm reading to document kind of what I'm thinking. Sometimes my noticings are connections I can make between Opal and myself because, we're getting to know her as a friend. Sometimes my noticings are questions, things that I don't understand that I can ask the teacher whenever we are coming back together to review the text. And sometimes my noticings are the strategies that we practice. How do I develop theories about Opal? How do I get to the rest of the iceberg of Opal, right? Figuring out why she does things. So in chapter 10, she is sharing anything that she would like, any and everything about herself to Gloria Dump. And here is the part in the book where I noticed I added a post-it. This is what the text said. And the whole time I was talking, Gloria Dump was listening. She was nodding her head and smiling and frowning and saying, and is that right? I could feel her listening with all her heart, and it felt good. Now, I thought that this was really an important thought that the author shared that Opal was having, so I decided to make a noticing, and here's what it said. I notice Opal thinks that it feels good that Gloria Dump is listening carefully to her. This must make her feel important. Now, I'm going to take my noticing and I'm going to do a little self-assessment, meaning I'm going to decide what was great about my noticing, what was lacking in my noticing, where does it fall on my learning progression. So today our learning progressions that we're going to focus on is inferring about character traits. So that's taking little clues from the story and figuring what kind of character we have. So in my noticing, I take a part of the text, recognize it, and then decide what does this mean about my character. So let's see where that fits. In our first box here, we have, I notice big things that a character says, does, and thinks. Well, that was the first thing I said to you all when I paused. I said, I think that this was a really important thought that the character included for us. Let's see what else. And I think about what this might show about a character's feeling. Well, shows that she feels important. I think about whether the main character meets with a problem, and if so, how the character solves it. So that part doesn't really apply to the part of the text. My noticing really matches well with this first paragraph right here. So let's see if it matches the second box. See what stage I'm at here, what step I'm at. I can develop ideas or theories about the kind of person a character is. Well, I don't really talk about that. I just talk about how it makes her feel. I know this means talking about a character's traits, personality, and I'm careful not to confuse the way a character feels for a trait. When a character makes a decision and does something, I can usually figure out why based on what I know of the character and what happened earlier. So, if I'm doing some self-assessment, I would say that right now I am in this stage, right? I'm telling you that she is feeling important. In order for me to bump up to the next step, what I'm going to need to do is talk more about Opal's personality, Opal's traits, and also explain how that connects to things that I know about her from previous chapters. Not just taking that tiny bit of the text that I showed you from chapter 10, but connecting it back to some previous parts. Let me show you what that would look like. In order for me to go from this step to this step, here's what I would need to add. I notice Opal thinks that it feels good that Gloria Dump is listening carefully to her. This must make her feel important. Watch what I add, which is particularly special for Opal since we know that she feels lonely without many friends. Okay, I am connecting it to a theory I had. I've thought for many chapters now that Opal's very lonely. She talked to Winn-Dixie about it in chapter 2. She prayed about it in chapter 4 or 5, I believe, when she was in church. Now let's see if I can connect it to anything I know that happened earlier. A good friend who listens to her is something she's been praying for since chapter 5. There is my connection to something that happened earlier. So you can see the difference between these two noticings. And you can see that when I was in this step 2 right now, if I were making a goal, it would probably go something like this. I need to add a character trait, and I need to connect it to something that happened earlier in the story. Let's try it with a different learning progression and a different part of our text. This is a noticing from chapter 11. As I was flipping through because of Winn-Dixie, I noticed that I had a post-it in chapter 11 on this exact spot. Yes, sir, I said again. All of a sudden, it was hard for me to talk. I loved the preacher so much. I loved him because he loved Winn-Dixie. I loved him because he was going to forgive Winn-Dixie for being afraid. But most of all, I loved him for putting his arm around Winn-Dixie like that, like he was already trying to keep him safe. Here is the noticing that I wrote down on the post-it. I notice Opal is feeling so much love for Preacher that she is almost crying. Friends, I don't know that I've seen this much emotion from Opal, so I thought that this was a really important part to note something. This must be because he's starting to love Winn-Dixie more. Seems like a good noticing. I know Winn-Dixie's super important to Opal, so of course she's going to love Preacher more when she knows that he also values something that's so important to her like Winn-Dixie. Let's see where this might fall on our learning progression. Now this one is different from character traits. Here we are responding to how characters change in our story. If I am looking at step 1, here's what I would be looking for. I can talk about how a character changes and why. Well, I talked about how she kind of changed because this is the first time I've noticed so much emotion in Opal. And my why is that I think it's because he's starting to show Winn-Dixie so much love. Let's see what it would take for me to go to step 2. I notice how a character changes across the story. So again, I'm going to need to go back to the text and think about what's happened in all of the chapters previous to chapter 11. And I can think about key moments in the story that caused the character to change. Let me show you what it would take, because right now I'm sitting right here at this first box and I need to improve my reading strategies, probably needing to make some connections and add more. Here's what that might look like. I notice Opal is feeling so much love for Preacher that she's almost crying. There's my change. This must be because he's starting to love Winn-Dixie more. Well, that's exactly what's happening right then in the text, but watch how I can connect it and add more. This is particularly important because Winn-Dixie is so special to Opal, and because we know Preacher wasn't exactly a big fan of dogs in chapter 2 when he met Winn-Dixie. Across the story, there's my change. I also think Opal is feeling more love for Preacher because he has opened up and shared more about her mom, which Opal has talked a lot about since he did this in chapter 4. There's my key moment. She's connecting all the way back 7 chapters ago to when she first felt that Preacher was really opening up to her about her mom. So, what do I do with this information? I know where I started from. I know what it would look like if I wanted to become a better reader. So we're going to use these 4 prompts today for you to create a goal and make a plan of how you're going to achieve that goal. Here's the good news, 3rd grade. The first 2 sentences, you get a chance to brag about all of the strategies that you've gotten really great at. What kind of reader are you? What do you notice? What are the clues that an author gives you that says, yikes, this is a point in the text where I need to pause and jot something down, possibly on a post-it, maybe in a notebook. Another chance for you to brag is one thing I take notice of when I read is, what are you great at? Do you notice when Opal is changing? Do you notice when your character's theories are proving to be right? Do you notice when maybe you need to change a theory that you have about a character? Are you really great at asking yourself why, figuring out the iceberg of your character? Your third sentence for today is going to help you develop a goal that you have. I can improve my reading by creating a goal. This will be, do you need to add more to your noticings? Do you need to connect it to prior chapters? Do you need to dig deeper if you have theories about characters? Do you need to know that maybe your theory didn't start out right and it needs to be changed as you learn more about your character? And then last but not least, you're going to come up with a plan. How are you going to achieve your goal? Are you going to add more to your noticings? Are you going to create more noticings in general? These sentences you are going to complete and you're going to submit them to your teacher so that we have a record of what your plan is to achieve your goal of becoming a better reader. Cannot wait to see what you come up with, third grade.